Thank you. Okay, so yes, my name is Ina Laura Perkins, and I'm the CEO of Realheart. And my background is as a biomedical scientist. And it's really fun for me personally to be here today, because in this building is where I started my research career. So I worked up on the 6th floor in Jan-Åke Gustafsson's lab as a summer worker, many summers. So it's nice to close the circle and be here. And so my background is as a biomedical scientist, and I started out with cell biology, did my PhD in the UK in mesenchymal stem cells, and I always had sort of the connection between heart and blood. So then it became natural to move into the field of heart pumps. So for those of you who don't know what a heart pump is, it's a little metal pump that you put inside of the heart, and you take out the blood from the heart, and you put it into the aorta. So it sort of supports and helps the heart. But some patients, this doesn't work for. Some patients are more ill than this, and their whole heart has stopped functioning. And in that case, you need a heart transplant, you need a new heart, or, because there are not enough transplants, an artificial heart, a complete replacement of the diseased heart. And that's what we're working on at Realheart. So when you have an artificial heart, you have something inside, but then you also have something on the outside. And this something on the outside is the controller that needs to be run with batteries. And typically, this is what makes you identify a heart pump patient, an artificial heart patient. They don't look like usual because they have this big bulky thing that they're carrying. And we decided we don't want it to be like that. We want you to be able to live a normal life with an artificial heart. So you can just blend in. And that's why what you see here in the image is our controller. So we've highlighted it a little bit here just to show it. But we're working on an internal heart and an external controller that drives the heart. And this is really lightweight and fits in a handbag. So you can just not be seen as a heart pump patient. And the disease that we're addressing is heart failure. So it's a worldwide disease. 64 million patients suffer from heart failure, and it is more deadly than many cancers. So 50% of patients die within 5 years of diagnosis. And when you have this failure of the entire heart, it's called biventricular failure, both on the left and the right side, you have a few options. So heart transplantation is one, but there's only 8,000 hearts for all of the patients in the world per year to share. So you can see that the gap is really big. If you look at what those numbers mean in Sweden, we have 60 transplants per year and 3,500 patients dying each year. And we have 250,000 approximately living with heart failure in the population. So that gap is what we're trying to bridge. Both to bridge patients so they stay alive long enough to get their transplant, but then also offer an alternative to transplantation. There are some other solutions. One is called biventricular assist. So you can have pumps on the outside that support you, but that's only temporary and typically associated with a lot of side effects. And then it's the third option that we're working on, a total artificial heart. Looking at what that means in terms of market size, it's a very big market. It's 34 billion US dollars approximately is the total addressable market. What that means in terms of patients that could be using an artificial heart per year, we have made an estimate of about 25,000 in the EU and the US. That's a lower measure compared to our competitors, but we try to be more on the conservative side. And our company was founded by a medical doctor. He watched a documentary in 1999 on the Discovery Channel, and he saw artificial hearts because they have been around for a long time. The first one was like in the 1980s. So over 2,000 patients have already been saved by artificial hearts. So it's not science fiction. But he saw this documentary and then he thought, why don't they look anything like the human heart? Because the human heart has developed through evolution to pump blood in a very smooth and gentle way and to be very energy efficient. So he decided he wanted to develop a heart that had like the human heart, had the same structure and the same function. So what would it look like? Well, at Realheart, we believe it looks like this. So we have two separate pumps, one left and one right, so left heart side, right heart side, and they connect like this to the vasculature. So for those who may not know exactly how the human heart pumps, I wanted to show this video. So in the human heart, you have the left and the right side, so a left pump and a right pump. And then at the top, you have these two atria, and at the bottom, the ventricles. And if you look now, you can see that the movement is downwards. So the human heart is like a piston pump. With each movement of the AV plane down to the apex, the heart is pumping out blood in pulses. And this is what we copy. Now, this is a slightly old animation, so our device looks nicer than this, but this still shows the principle. So you have the left and the right side, so two separate pumps. At the top, you have the atria, and the bottom, you have the ventricles. And you can see this valve plane or valve cylinder that contains the valve here. So when it moves down, the pressure increases in the ventricle, and the valve closes, and the aortic valve opens, and blood comes out in these pulses. And we control this automatically. So we have pressure sensors that are integrated in the atria, and as you're, for example, walking up the stairs, more blood comes up from the legs into the atria, the pressure increases, and we set a target rate, and if it goes above, then the heart is then pumping more. So increasing the pulse, increasing the stroke volume, adjusting the percent systole. And it does it independently on the left and the right side, because the left side needs to pump a little bit more to also supply the lungs with oxygenated blood. So something that is typically difficult to achieve when you're developing an artificial heart is this left-right balance. But in our solution, it is technically easy. So that's what's happening on the inside. And we're pumping this blood as gently as possible to minimize side effects to the blood. But then focusing also on the outside, that's what the patient sees. So there we have just a single drive line that comes through the skin, as opposed to two, which is what the market-leading device has. And we have longer battery life, it is silent, the size is small, and the weight is low. And we have also a collaboration with a company in Gothenburg, it's called In Vivo Power. And we gained some Vinnova funding to show that we can do wireless charging through the skin. It is not our first product, we won't do it as going to the clinic, but then a follow-up can be wirelessly charged. So we get away from that connection through the skin. And this is important because about 40% of heart pump patients nowadays have these drive-line infections. So as long as you just close the skin, you can avoid this. So the three important factors then about our heart is the structure is a natural design. We're copying the human heart in the structure. We can pump as much as the patient needs through these pressure sensors in the atria and the adaptive algorithm. And then we're trying to make it as simple as possible for the surgeons by having two pumps. You can put them in based on the patient's own anatomy, and also then having this easy-to-use controller for the patient. There are about 4 companies that are developing artificial hearts in the world, so we're the only Swedish one. And then we have a competitor in France, it's called the Carmat. There is an Australian device called the Bivacor, and then there's the Syncardia that was the one that was developed initially. And we have this device, and we test against it. So if anybody's interested in seeing, okay, what does the device look like that saved the lives of over 2,000 patients, and most importantly, what does it sound like, then we can show you in our lab at a different time. And here is a documentary, because we were followed by a TV team, a German-French TV team, and they were developing a documentary for Art Day. So it aired earlier in the year in Germany and France, which from a company perspective is important to us because these are the 2 biggest markets in Europe. And we also learned from that the device that is our competitor in Europe, we always thought was silent, and we thought that it gave a good patient quality of life. But through this documentary, we're able to see a patient that actually has this device. So we learned something from this. This is a female patient, the first female patient to have received this artificial heart. It's a very short clip, but you can see already that this is what she's carrying. This is bulky, it weighs a lot, and she has quite a thick driveline that comes through her skin, the white cable that you see. So what we learned was the sound level, because we always assumed that this was silent. So this is as good as it gets currently for artificial heart patients. It's a very short clip that repeats, but just for you to hear. It's like a whizzing sound. So imagine this is what you walk around with every day. And here you can see our system. So we have the artificial heart that goes on the inside. Sometimes I get questions about size, like how big can an artificial heart be? And it can be as big as a heart failure patient's heart. Because when you have heart failure, your heart starts to expand. And in some patients, it's as big as a balloon. And it's then pushing on the other tissues over time, so you create this space. A problem can be if you put in a too small device, because the body starts adapting back. And if this is for a patient that's later going to have a heart transplant, then the surgeons have a hard time on the operating table when they can't get the donor heart in, because now it's shrunk back. So it's actually good to keep that space open for the potential future transplant. And then we have the driveline that comes through the skin. It's coiled, because imagine you're dropping your controller. You don't want that to tug on your wound site. So that's an extra safety for the patient. We have then the controller that has batteries that are possible to remove by just pulling them out and putting them back in, as opposed to having even more cables, which is the norm today. And then a power bank should you want to venture for a further say a train trip or something like that. So throughout our systems design, we've tried to keep in mind, what does the patient want to have and how do you live as normal as possible? And we are partly based here. So we do all of our blood testing up here on the 7th floor, but the company headquarters is in Västerås. And in the same documentary, the TV team came to visit us. So I can actually show you a little bit what it looks like. And this is a German documentary. I don't know how many of you speak German, but just to explain what we will see here is we're going to the prototype test lab with our Chief Technology Officer, Thomas Finocchiaro. And we had he is one of the few people in the world who actually has a PhD in artificial heart development. So we were very happy to recruit him. And he's explaining in the video how our automatic control works. So we put the heart in these mock loops. So they're basically a patient on the benchtop. We fill it with water or blood or saline solution. And then if you fill more, then the heart automatically responds. So if you remember walking up the stairs, more blood comes up into your heart, the heart automatically responds. And that's what he's going to show in this video.
50 Jahre später wird noch immer an Kunstherzen geforscht. Etwa eine Autostunde nordwestlich von Stockholm befindet sich ein neuer Prototyp gerade in.
And this is our device in running. Membrane test rigs, making sure all components work safely.
Unser natürliches Herz hat verschiedenste Regelmechanismen und ein sehr wichtiger Regelmechanismus ist, dass es darauf reagiert, wie viel Blut zum Herzen zurückkommt. Ja, wenn ich Sport mache, erhöht sich das Blut, der Blutdruck am Einlass des Herzens. Das Herz bekommt es mit und fördert es dann mehr.
Now you'll see him do it.
Simuliere ich quasi, dass der Patient anfängt Sport zu machen und damit kommt mehr Blut zum Herzen zurück.
So listen.
Und jetzt sehen wir, wie das Herz reagiert hat. Stärker und schneller schlägt.
So
Realheart heißt
So it's completely automatic. The patient doesn't need to think about this, so it just happens. And as any startup, we've had to think about our patent portfolio. So we have a patent portfolio of 8 patent families. We cover in the main markets for us, and then also in the up-and-coming markets, which we believe are China and India. And we have coverage for our device in several layers, but then also various spin-off technologies. So to get to the patient, what is it that we have to do? And for an artificial heart, this was maybe a little bit difficult to figure out in the beginning. So we had a meeting with the FDA. So we did a pre-sub, we went there, and we had a lot of questions of what do you want to see? So what they said is there are mainly 3 data packages that are of importance. Firstly, it's hemolysis. So this means how damaged do the red blood cells become? And this type of testing is what we do here in Novum. So we pump the blood, we take the samples. If the red blood cells become damaged, they start leaking out hemoglobin, and that's what we measure. And we just have to be as good as the main market-leading product, so as a clinical reference. But of course, it's nicer if we're better. And then we have to implant the device in animals. For heart pumps, the large animal models are typically calves and sheep, but calves have the problem of a really, really fast growth rate. So then by the end of your study, you may actually have induced heart failure by putting it into a calf. So we use sheep because they're a more stable animal model. And there are a lot of challenges with working with artificial heart animal models. So it's probably been the biggest challenge of my work. I used to implant the smaller heart pumps that go inside the heart and think that that was advanced, but that was a piece of cake compared to the studies that we do, because we have to keep everything perfect, because sheep are so much more sensitive compared to the human patient. And then reliability testing. So similar to what you saw there in the video, using it on the bench, doing over and over and over testing against different loads, and ideally worst case scenarios, even heavier loads than what the patient would experience. And then those data packages would then go towards the first in human trial. Initially, most likely a smaller trial, about 4 patients, and then expanding. Our competitor in France, they implanted a total of 14 patients before they got the CE mark, and that was limiting the study early just because of the big need, clinical need of these patients. And there are other aspects to the testing. We like to do a lot of computer-based testing because it's learning as much as possible from that before going to in vitro. And in heart pumps, that is a lot about how does the blood flow, because you want to make sure that it doesn't experience a lot of mechanical stress, because that would damage the cells, and that it doesn't leave any points in the pump where blood is stagnating, because that would lead to blood clots. And then we also do hybrid cardiovascular simulator testing, which is actually in collaboration with KTH, amongst others. We have a Vinnova finance project with the first patient on the bench, and it's right here. So it's nice synergies here in Flemingsberg. This is an example of the testing that we do here in Novum. So taking these, putting the blood into all the different pumps, and then taking these samples at time points. So here you can see blood that hasn't been pumped at all, just sitting in the water bath, and then blood in the Realheart, and then blood in the main market-leading product. So we have about 80% less hemolysis with our device, and we think that is because of this natural pumping mechanism that our device can do. And we also do von Willebrand factor testing. So this is a coagulation protein that binds together the platelets and forms the initial platelet plug if you have a wound. And it's typically degraded in heart pump patients because of the continuous flow. But what we can see is that we maintain the function of von Willebrand factor as opposed to a positive control continuous flow pump. So that pulsatility gives the von Willebrand factor time to rest and recover. And then the important testing, of course, is how does this all work in the animal? You do all kinds of simulations, but really this is the ultimate test. And what we do then is working with the sheep, and these are healthy sheep, and we have to do a lot of virtual implantations first. So we make 3D models of sheep in the computer. We do operations in them before so that we optimize everything going into the surgery. And then this is what they look like after having the Realheart. So you really can't tell. They're doing normal sheep behavior. Of course, we need to keep some data cables to continuously monitor all of their pressures, but they're behaving like normal sheep. And we can also see from the blood pressure curve that we have this really neat pulsatile flow, and a blood pressure here is about 120/80 is what you say is normal, so we have a very natural blood pressure as well. CVP is about 9. And if you remember those hemolysis tests that we did, if you do them in the lab, it's obviously the worst case scenario because you don't have any organ systems that can clean up the hemoglobin. But in the animal, we have that. So we have an initial really high spike from the heart-lung machine. But as soon as we disconnect the heart-lung machine and our heart is doing the job, we've cleared that within 24 hours. So then we have the clear urine and plasma samples. We're working on various regulatory paths in parallel. So we gained recently the humanitarian use device designation from the FDA. This means we have a product that is meeting a really, really high clinical need. And we are then working for bridge transplant with the FDA of the regulatory PMA path, and then also for the CE mark. We have, from the beginning, been very interested in academic collaborations. We believe that we should be making the best device, but we should be working with the experts when it comes to the testing. So we have multiple collaborations with universities that are looking into the simulations, the in vitro bench testing, yeah, we're very happy about this. Our most recent collaboration is with Sahlgrenska Hospital, where the clinical team now really want to practice the surgery. So we will be doing a lot of implants with them and also looking at the anatomy of those heart transplant patients that are on the waiting list, just to really prepare as much as possible for the first clinical case. And in our team, except me and Thomas, who you saw in the video, one key member to mention is also Ulf Kjellman, he's a cardiothoracic surgeon. And he used to be the chief of Sahlgrenska. So he really knows this team very well and helped us to establish this contact. Here are some of the collaborators that we're working with as well, but there are many more. And I want to end here to give time for discussion. If you have any questions, more than welcome to ask me also in the break. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, and happy to take any questions in the break.